The testing chamber gleamed with sterile white light as examiner Jacques adjusted the final calibration settings on the Psi measurement array. 4 arms moved with practiced precision across the holographic controls, while compound eyes tracked 17 different readings simultaneously. Jacques had performed this exact procedure 2,347 times across 212 different species. Not once had the equipment failed. Not once had the results been unclear. The psi scale was absolute. It had been absolute for 40,000 years of galactic concordance history. Today would be different, though Jacques did not know this yet. The human delegation entered through the airlock, with the awkward shuffling gait of species still adjusting to artificial gravity. Captain Sarah Chen led the group, her dark hair pulled back in the efficient style common to military officers across a dozen worlds. Behind her came 3 other humans, a diplomat, an engineer, and a scientist. They looked unremarkable by galactic standards. Bipedal, bilateral symmetry, basic sensory organs, no obvious adaptations for psi manipulation. "Welcome to Testing Station Kepler 7. Jacques' translator rendered the clicks and whistles into human standard English. "I am Examiner Jacques of the Sessith Confederation, licensed psi evaluator for the Concordance." Sarah nodded and extended her hand in the human greeting gesture she had been briefed was important to their species. Jacques touched one manipulator appendage to her palm briefly, having studied the cultural files. "Thank you for accommodating us," Sarah said. "We understand this is standard procedure for all newly contacted civilizations." "Indeed it is." Jacques gestured toward the testing chamber. "The psi scale measures the strength of conscious thought's interaction with quantum fields, what you might call psychic or mental energy." The examiner pulled up a holographic display showing a gradient scale from 0 to 16. "Every sentient species possesses some level of psi capability," Jacques explained. "It is fundamental to consciousness itself." Small icons appeared along the scale showing various alien species. The Valkyrie Mindseers rate at 11.2, Jacques indicated a cluster of crystalline beings. The Draft Collective averages 7.8. The Corvin Unity sits at 4.3. The display with the focused attention of someone trained to absorb tactical information quickly. "Where do most species fall?" she asked. "The median is approximately 5.6, Jacques replied. "Anything above 8.0 is considered exceptional. Below 2.0 is quite rare. Those species typically require assistance with certain administrative and technical functions." The implication hung in the air like a weight. Species with low psi ratings became labor castes, support workers, the infrastructure that kept galactic civilization running. High psi species made the decisions, held the power, shaped policy. Sarah's jaw tightened slightly, but she said nothing. "And the top of the scale?" asked Marcus Webb, the human engineer. "The legendary Vormeth Ascendants." Jacques' translator carried a tone of reverence. 15.7. They vanished 12,000 years ago, presumed lost in the Great Silence event. No species has approached their level since. Jacques moved toward the testing chamber itself, a circular platform surrounded by sensor arrays and projection equipment. "The test is quite simple," the examiner explained. "You will sit here while I measure your baseline neural quantum signature. Then you will perform basic exercises, moving a small object with focused thought, sensing nearby minds, projecting simple concepts. The entire process takes approximately 30 standard minutes." Sarah stepped onto the platform without hesitation. Command training had prepared her for worse than sitting still while aliens pointed strange equipment at her. The other humans took seats in the observation area beyond the transparent barrier. Jacques initiated the first sequence. Holographic displays bloomed around the examiner's workstation, showing wavelengths and frequencies that represented Sarah's mental activity. The baseline reading appeared, 3.1. Jacques' antenna twitched with mild surprise. That was slightly above average, better than expected for a newly contacted species. Please focus on the crystal. Jakal indicated a small purple gemstone floating in a suspension field. Try to move it using only your thoughts. Sarah stared at the crystal, her brow furrowed with concentration. Minutes passed. The crystal did not move. The psi reading dropped to 2.8, then 2.4. Do not force it, Jakal advised. Imagine your consciousness extending outward like a hand, gently touching the object. Sarah tried again. Her face showed increasing frustration. The crystal wobbled slightly, probably from air currents in the chamber. The reading continued to decline. 2.1, 1.9, 1.7. In the observation area, Marcus Webb whispered to the diplomat, "Doesn't look good." Jakal noted the readings with growing concern. Perhaps humans were indeed a lobe-psi species. There was no shame in it. Many civilizations contributed greatly to the concordance, despite limited psychic ability. But Sarah's obvious distress suggested humans placed great importance on this evaluation. Let us try the sensing exercise instead, Jakal suggested gently. I will project a simple emotion. Try to identify what you feel. The examiner focused, sending a carefully controlled pulse of contentment through the quantum field. Sarah closed her eyes. I don't feel anything, she said after a long moment. I'm not sure if that's from me or you. The reading, 1.4. Jakal made careful notes. The pattern was clear now. Humans would likely rate somewhere between 1 and 2 on the psi scale. Functional, but limited. They would need significant support from higher psi species in administrative roles. It was disappointing, but not catastrophic. Then something strange happened. Sarah, clearly frustrated with the test, stopped trying. Her shoulders relaxed, and she glanced toward her colleagues with an expression of resigned annoyance. The psi scale display flickered. 8.3. Jakal's 4 eyes widened in astonishment. That had to be an error. The reading dropped again, 0.4. Then jumped, 12.1. Then settled, 3.2. The numbers were changing faster than Jakal had ever seen. Are you doing something different? The examiner asked urgently, confused. No, I'm just sitting here, she replied. I gave up on moving the crystal. 14.7, 6.8, 9.9. The display was going wild. Jakal quickly ran a diagnostic on the equipment. All systems showed green, perfect operational status. Please remain still, Jakal commanded. I need to recalibrate. But Sarah wasn't doing anything that could cause interference. She was simply existing, breathing normally, occasionally glancing around the chamber with idle curiosity. And the psi scale was losing its mind. 18.2. The number climbed beyond anything Jakal had seen in 300 years of testing. Beyond the legendary Vormeth. Beyond what the scale was designed to measure. Error warnings began flashing across the display. In the observation area, Marcus Webb stood abruptly. Is Sarah okay? He called out. Replied, though the examiner's voice carried uncertainty. The equipment is experiencing unusual readings. 23.6. Impossible. The scale wasn't designed to register that high. It couldn't register that high. Sarah Chen sat calmly on the testing platform, completely unaware that she had just broken a measurement system that had stood unchanged for 40 millennia. She was thinking about whether the station cafeteria would have anything resembling actual coffee, and the entire galaxy was about to change. Jakal stood frozen before the cascade of impossible numbers. The psi scale display had transitioned from numerical readouts to visual warnings in urgent crimson. 3 technicians rushed into the chamber carrying portable diagnostic equipment. Shut it down, Jakal commanded. Shutdown protocol initiated, the lead technician confirmed. The arrays powered down with a descending whine. Sarah remained on the platform, looking thoroughly confused by the sudden activity. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. "No," Jacques replied carefully. "The equipment appears to be malfunctioning. This is unprecedented. We will need to replace the primary sensor array." Over the next 4 hours, the technical team systematically dismantled and replaced every component of the testing apparatus. The primary quantum field detectors replaced. The neural pattern analyzers replaced. The consciousness resonance chambers replaced. The power distribution network replaced. Even the platform itself was swapped out for a backup unit from storage. Finally, at the insistence of a paranoid junior technician, they moved the entire test to a different chamber on the opposite side of the station. Sarah endured it all with patience born from years of military bureaucracy. When the new chamber was ready, she took her place once again. "Beginning baseline measurement," Zakal announced. The reading stabilized at 4.1, higher than before, but well within normal parameters for a sentient species. "Good," Zakal said with relief. "Please focus on the crystal again." Sarah concentrated. The crystal didn't move. Her reading dropped to 3.3. Then Zakal noticed Sarah's expression shift. Her focus wavered as she glanced at the chronometer on the wall. The reading jumped to 11.8. "What were you just thinking about?" Zakal demanded. Sarah blinked in surprise. "I was wondering how much longer this would take," she admitted. "I'm supposed to meet with the Concordance Cultural Liaison in 2 hours, and I haven't prepared my notes." As she spoke, distracted by explaining herself, the reading climbed, 14.2. The moment she realized Zakal was staring at the display and tried to focus on being measured, the number plummeted, 2.7. "This is impossible," Zakal whispered. But the pattern was undeniable now. The second human volunteer confirmed it. Marcus Webb sat in the testing chamber while Zakal watched the readings with growing dread. When Marcus actively tried to perform the psi exercises, 3.1. When Marcus became bored waiting between tests and started mentally designing improvements to a ship's engine configuration, 16.4. The scientist, Dr. Kenji Yamamoto, showed the same pattern. Active concentration, 2.8. Idle daydreaming about his research, 19.7. The diplomat, Ambassador Lu Chen, nearly broke the scale entirely. When asked to project a simple concept, she struggled and registered 1.9. When she stopped trying and began rehearsing her diplomatic speech in her head, a speech about human cultural values and the importance of imagination, every psi-sensitive being within 50 meters suddenly experienced vivid images of Earth. Forests, oceans, cities of metal and glass. The sensation was so overwhelming that a Valkyrie observer collapsed and had to be escorted to medical. Zakal contacted the Concordance Science Directorate immediately. The response came within minutes. Hold the humans at the station and conduct continuous monitoring. 4 senior researchers arrived via emergency jump gate within 6 hours. They brought equipment Zakal had only read about in classified journals. Experimental psi dampeners, multispectrum consciousness analyzers, quantum entanglement tracers. The lead researcher was a Valkyrie named Crystal Song in Morning, whose own psi rating of 11.2 made her one of the most powerful telepaths in Concordance space. She examined the data with her species' characteristic precision. "The pattern is consistent across all human subjects," she announced to the assembled team. When humans consciously focus on psychic tasks, their psi signatures align with typical low to moderate ratings. When they are distracted, relaxed, or engaged in abstract thought, their signatures become unmeasurable. "How is this possible?" demanded a Corvan physicist. "Every species in Concordance records shows stable, consistent psi ratings." Crystal Song in Morning projected a complex holographic model of neural activity. "We believe humans evolved differently," explained. Most species develop psi abilities as survival mechanisms. Telepathy for pack coordination, telekinesis for tool manipulation, precognition for predator avoidance. These abilities evolved with natural limiters to prevent neural burnout. Humans show no evidence of such limiters. The hologram shifted, showing human brain patterns compared to a dozen other species. Humans evolved complex abstract thought, imagination, and constant internal narrative without developing practical psi applications, Crystal Song in Morning continued. Their consciousness operates at extremely high quantum coherence levels continuously, but they have no biological mechanisms to channel or control it. They are like fusion reactors with no containment field, muttered the Corvan physicist. Z-Call spoke up from the back of the room. I observed something else, the examiner said. The human engineer, Marcus Webb, became hungry during. He was not even in the testing chamber at the time. He was sitting in the waiting area. But every psi sensitive within 50 meters suddenly received detailed sensory information about something called pepperoni pizza. I can still taste it, admitted a draft technician with obvious distress. It should not be possible to transmit taste sensations. That requires at least rating 9.0. Crystal Song in Morning's crystalline structure flickered with the color that indicated deep concern. We need to test the upper limits, she said. With proper monitoring, we should determine exactly how high human psi potential reaches. Sarah volunteered again. She was placed in a reinforced chamber designed for testing potentially dangerous psi phenomena. A dozen researchers monitored from behind triple-shielded observation walls. I want you to relax completely, Crystal Song in Morning instructed via intercom. Do not try to use any psi abilities. Simply let your mind wander naturally. Sarah nodded and settled into the comfortable chair they had provided. She closed her eyes. She thought about home, Earth, the small apartment in Seattle she had left behind when she joined the deep space program. Her sister's daughter, who would be starting school soon. The dog she had adopted from a shelter, now being cared for by her parents. Reading novels on rainy Sunday afternoons. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery near her apartment. The psi scale display climbed steadily. 12, 15, 18, 22. This is incredible, breathed one researcher. Sarah's mind drifted to a science fiction novel she had been reading before the mission launched. A story about humans discovering faster-than-light travel and meeting aliens. In the story, the aliens were surprised by human creativity and resilience. It was funny how the book had almost predicted their current situation, though the author had gotten the details wrong. The reading, 28.4. Then, Sarah's thoughts turned darker. She remembered the briefing where they had explained the psi scale and its social implications. The worry that humanity might be classified as a low psi species. The fear of becoming second-class citizens in a galactic society. The determination to prove human worth. Her jaw clenched unconsciously. Anger flickered through her thoughts. Anger at the idea that her entire species might be judged and found wanting based on a single test. The lights in the observation room flickered. A coffee cup on the researcher's table fell over without being touched. The temperature dropped 3 degrees. Reading, 34.7. Shut it down, someone shouted. The containment field is destabilizing. Crystal Song in Morning raised a manipulator appendage. Wait, she commanded. Sarah, the Valkyrie called through the intercom. Please think of something peaceful. Sarah heard the urgency in the translated voice. She deliberately shifted her thoughts. Music. Mozart's Piano Concerto No. 21. The one her mother used to play on Sunday mornings. Beautiful and structured and calm. The reading stabilized but remained high. 23.9. She can modulate it, Crystal Song in Morning said with wonder. Not with focus or training, but with natural emotional regulation. When she became angry, the output spiked. When she chose peaceful thoughts, It smoothed out, but it never went below 20. The implications settled over the research team like a heavy blanket. Humans weren't just high psi, they were off the scale entirely, and they had absolutely no idea they were doing it. Jakal stared at the readouts and wondered what exactly humanity had just unleashed upon the galaxy. The Emergency Scientific Summit convened in the largest conference chamber on Kepler-7. Representatives from 23 species filled the tiered seating. Crystal Song and Morning stood at the central podium with holographic displays floating around her crystalline form. We have spent 4 days conducting comprehensive testing of human subjects, she began. Our findings require a fundamental reassessment of psi theory. The display showed neural pattern comparisons. Every known species evolved psi abilities with corresponding limiters, Crystal Song and Morning explained. The Velkari developed powerful telepathy, but our minds automatically constrain output to prevent feedback loops. The Drath evolved precognition, but with built-in filters to avoid temporal paradox shock. The Sessif possess moderate telekinesis, but neural governors prevent overexertion. The hologram shifted to show human brain activity. Evolved none of these abilities, and therefore none of these limiters. Instead, they developed something unique, constant high-level abstract cognition. A Korvan scientist raised a manipulator appendage. Surely other species engage in abstract thought, he objected. Indeed, Crystal Song and Morning agreed, but most species think in abstract terms only when necessary. Humans appear incapable of turning it off. She pulled up monitoring data from Sarah's quarters. This is Captain Chen during her rest period last night. She was reading a novel, fiction. The display showed Sarah lying on her bunk, eyes moving across a datapad. The psi signature graph beside the image was a chaotic mountain range of peaks and valleys. While reading, her mind fully simulated the fictional scenario, Crystal Song and Morning continued. She experienced the emotions of characters who do not exist. She visualized places that are not real. She mentally inhabited perspectives other than her own. The psi output during this relaxation activity peaked at 41.3. Shocked murmurs rippled through the chamber. That number is impossible, declared an elderly Sessif physicist. The psi scale was not designed to measure beyond 16. Precisely, Crystal Song and Morning said. We have had to completely recalibrate our equipment, and the results are forcing us to confront an uncomfortable truth. We have never actually measured maximum psi potential. We have only measured controlled psi output. The holographic display expanded to show the historic psi scale. For 40,000 years, we believed the Vormeth ascendants at 15.7 represented the peak of psychic ability. We were wrong. They represented the peak of controlled psychic ability. Humans may possess 10 times that potential, possibly, but they have no control at all. A Velkari observer stood abruptly. This makes them incredibly dangerous, she declared. Unconscious reality manipulation at that scale could destabilize entire regions of space. We have observed concerning incidents already, Crystal Song and Morning admitted. She pulled up the first report. Yesterday, engineer Marcus Webb had an argument with another human crew member about optimal engine configurations. The video showed Marcus gesturing emphatically while explaining his position. During this disagreement, localized gravity fluctuations occurred in a 3-meter radius around Webb. Small objects began floating. The effect lasted 47 seconds and ceased when Webb calmed down. The next report appeared. Dr. Yamamoto entered deep sleep at approximately 0300 station time. The image showed the scientist's quarters from an external monitor, created minor spatial anomalies in the adjacent compartments. 2 station personnel reported experiencing unusual sensations, seeing colors that should not exist, hearing sounds without source. Analysis suggests Dr. Yamamoto was dreaming about a research problem involving quantum mechanics. His unconscious mind was attempting to visualize mathematical concepts. The visualization manifested in physical space. The final report made several attendees shift uncomfortably in their seats. Captain Shen's reading session produced the most significant effect. The hologram showed the novel's cover, a space opera adventure story. The narrative involved a battle between starships. While Chen read the combat scenes, our sensors detected weapon signatures in her quarters. No actual weapons existed. Her imagination of the fictional battle was so vivid that quantum fields briefly organized into weapon-like patterns. Been imagining something more destructive. The consequences could have been severe. A long silence fell over the chamber. Finally, a Drath representative spoke. "What do the humans themselves think of this?" he asked. "They are confused and concerned," Crystal Song in Morning replied. "They have no subjective experience of using pi abilities. From their perspective, they are simply thinking normally. The idea that their thoughts affect physical reality seems absurd to them." The Corvin scientist who had objected earlier stood again. "I propose we bring one of them here," he said. "Let the humans speak for themselves. We cannot make policy decisions about an entire species without their input." Crystal Song in Morning signaled agreement. Sarah Chen arrived 20 minutes later. She entered the massive chamber and stopped short, clearly overwhelmed by the number of alien beings staring at her. "Chen." Crystal Song in Morning greeted her. "Thank you for joining us. We have been discussing the implications of human psi potential." Sarah walked to the center podium. The monitoring equipment around the chamber began registering her baseline, 28.4, and she was just standing there nervously. "I've been briefed on your findings," Sarah said carefully. "I want to be clear. Humans don't feel like we're doing anything unusual. When I read that book, I was just reading. I wasn't trying to create spatial anomalies or project anything." "We understand," Crystal Song in Morning assured her. "That is precisely what makes this so unprecedented. For your species, this level of psi output is normal." Sarah took a deep breath. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Are you going to decide that humans are too dangerous for Concordance membership?" Several attendees shifted uncomfortably. Unspoken answer hung in the air. A Valkyrie from the far tier spoke up. "Captain Shen, do you believe humans could learn to control these abilities?" Sarah considered the question. "I honestly don't know," she admitted. "But humans have a pretty good track record of learning to control dangerous things. We figured out nuclear fission without blowing up our planet. We developed genetic engineering without creating monsters. We built artificial intelligence without triggering a robot apocalypse. Give us time and proper guidance, and I believe we can learn to manage this too." As she spoke, passion entering her voice, the monitoring equipment registered a spike, 43.7. Objects on nearby tables began to vibrate slightly. Sarah noticed the reactions around her and forced herself to calm down. The readings dropped, 31.2. "You see," said a Sessith observer, "to control the output proves she has some capacity for regulation. It is instinctive, perhaps, but it exists." Crystal Song in Morning approached Sarah. "Would you be willing to participate in a demonstration?" the Valkyrie asked. "I want to show the council what we believe is possible." Sarah nodded. "What do you need me to do?" "Simply engage in normal human cognitive activity," Crystal Song in Morning explained, "but do so while consciously aware that you are being monitored. Try to feel the difference between focused thought and wandering thought." Sarah closed her eyes. She thought about the enormously important chess game happening right now. Humanity's future potentially being decided in this room. The reading, 29.8. Then she deliberately let her mind drift. She imagined her niece opening a birthday present. The little girl's face lighting up with joy, the way children experienced pure happiness without complication or doubt. The reading, 37.4. She shifted again. Mathematics. The elegant simplicity of prime numbers. The infinite complexity hidden within simple equations. The beauty of patterns emerging from chaos. Reading 44.9. Then she pulled herself back to awareness of the room, the aliens watching her. The weight of responsibility. The reading dropped. 33.1. Remarkable. Crystal Song and Morning announced to the assembly. Captain Chen just demonstrated crude but functional modulation. She shifted her output through a range of 15 points using nothing but conscious thought direction. No training, no technique, just natural human mental flexibility. Sarah opened her eyes. I don't understand what I'm supposed to be feeling, she said. But I can tell when my mind is focused versus when it's not. Wandering, Jarn. Is that what you mean? Exactly that. Crystal Song and Morning confirmed. Most species require years of training to achieve what you just did instinctively. A Drath elder who had been silent throughout the proceedings finally spoke. His voice carried the weight of centuries. I have seen enough, he declared. The humans are not weapons. They are children with enormous power and no understanding of it. The question is not whether they are dangerous. The question is whether we will help them grow or whether we will fear them into becoming what we fear most. His words settled over the chamber like snow. Sarah stood in the center of it all, representing her entire species, and wondered if wisdom alone would be enough. The encrypted message arrived during station night cycle, when most personnel were sleeping. Sarah woke to her communicator, flashing urgent priority. The message was audio only, heavily filtered to mask the speaker's identity. Captain Shen, you are in danger, the distorted voice said. The concordance is not what it appears to be. Meet me in Cargo Bay 7 in 1 hour. Come alone and tell no one. Sarah should have reported it immediately. Every protocol demanded she inform station security, but something in the message's tone, urgency mixed with genuine fear, made her hesitate. She dressed quietly and made her way through the empty corridors. Cargo Bay 7 was in the older section of the station, rarely used since the new facilities opened. The door was already unlocked. Inside, a figure waited in the shadows. As Sarah entered, emergency lighting activated, revealing a Valkyrie she had never seen before. This one's crystalline structure showed age, cracks and clouding that spoke of centuries of existence. Thank you for coming, the Valkyrie said, without electronic translation. The words formed directly in Sarah's mind through telepathy. My name is Crystal Depth of Ancient Waters. I am a member of a group called the Ascendancy Reclaimed. Sarah's hand moved instinctively toward her sidearm. I am not here to harm you, Crystal Depth assured her. I am here to tell you the truth about the concordance, and about what really happened to the Vormeth Ascendants. The Valkyrie projected images directly into Sarah's consciousness. Ships burning in space. Planets under quarantine. A species being systematically disappeared from galactic records. The concordance teaches that the Vormeth vanished 12,000 years ago in something called the Great Silence, Crystal Depth explained. This is a lie. The Vormeth were eliminated. More images flooded Sarah's mind. Secret tribunals. Weapons designed specifically to disrupt high psi consciousness. Entire colonies sterilized from orbit. The Vormeth reached 15.7 on the psi scale, Crystal Depth continued. They began asking questions about why the scale stopped there. They discovered the truth. The current concordance leadership deliberately suppresses maximum psi development. Sarah's mind reeled from the mental contact and the implications. Why would they do that? She managed to ask. Control, Crystal Depth replied simply. The races that currently hold power, the Valkyrie, the Drath, the High Councils, they all rate between 10 and 12 on the scale. Comfortable positions of authority. The Vormeth threatened that hierarchy. They could have surpassed the leadership, potentially rendered them obsolete. Leadership decided to remove the threat. The Velkhari's crystalline form pulsed with anger. They framed it as necessary for galactic stability. They claimed the Vormeth were becoming dangerous, losing touch with reality. But the truth was simpler. The Vormeth refused to accept artificial limits on their potential. Sarah's tactical mind was already working through the implications. And now humans show even higher potential than the Vormeth, she said, which makes us the next threat. Precisely, Crystal Depth confirmed. The Ascendancy Reclaimed has been monitoring the Concordance for millennia, waiting for another species to emerge with unlimited potential. We want to help you. We can teach you to access your true abilities. We can show you how to break free of the constraints the Concordance will try to impose. Sarah stepped back. What's your real agenda? She demanded. This, out of charity. Crystal Depth's form flickered with what might have been approval. You are perceptive, the ancient Velkhari acknowledged. We believe the current Concordance power structure is stagnant and corrupt. Species are assigned roles based on psi ratings and locked into those positions for generations. Innovation is suppressed. Growth is controlled. The Vormeth could have revolutionized galactic civilization, but they were destroyed for that very potential. We want to use humanity to overthrow the existing order. There it was, the truth laid bare. Sarah's expression hardened. You want to weaponize us, she said. We want to free you, Crystal Depth corrected, and in doing so, free the entire galaxy from a system that has calcified over 40,000 years. The Concordance will try to limit your abilities through training protocols that are actually suppression. Techniques. They will teach you to fear your own potential. They will convince you that control means diminishment. Sarah's communicator suddenly blazed with alerts. Station security had discovered her absence. They know you are here, Crystal Depth said. You must decide quickly, Captain Chen. Will you accept the Concordance's leash, or will you fight for humanity's true potential? Sarah backed toward the door. I need to think, she said. There's no time, Crystal Depth began. But Sarah was already moving. She sprinted through the corridors as alarms began sounding throughout the station. Security teams converged on Cargo Bay 7. Sarah reached the human quarters and immediately called for Marcus and the others. We have a problem, she said quickly. Multiple problems, actually. She explained everything. The secret meeting, the Ascendancy Reclaimed, the truth about the Vormeth. Marcus listened with growing alarm. So we're caught between two factions, he summarized. One wants to suppress us. The other wants to weaponize us. That about covers it, Sarah agreed. Dr. Yamamoto was already pulling up historical records on his datapad. I'm checking the Concordance archives for information about the Vormeth disappearance. Said. If there was a cover-up, there might be inconsistencies in the official records. Ambassador Lu Chen spoke up. We need to inform the Concordance leadership immediately, she insisted. If there's a conspiracy, we must— She stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes went unfocused. Every psi-sensitive being within 100 meters suddenly received a vivid burst of information. Sarah's memory of the meeting with Crystal Depth, the images of the Vormeth genocide, the revelation about suppression protocols, the Ascendancy Reclaims offer. Marcus had been thinking about all of it intensely, processing the implications. And his unconscious mind had broadcast the entire situation to everyone nearby. Alarms shrieked across the station. Crystal Song and Morning arrived at the human quarters within minutes, accompanied by Examiner Jacqual and a security detail. What just happened? The Velkhari researcher asked. Demanded. Everyone with psi sensitivity just received a massive information dump. Sarah realized there was no point in hiding anything now. The truth was already spreading like wildfire through the station's telepathic population. We were contacted by someone claiming to be from the Ascendancy Reclaimed. Sarah explained. They told us about the Vormeth, about what really happened to them. Crystal's song in morning's crystalline structure went completely still. Where did you hear that name? She asked quietly. Cargo Bay 7, Sarah replied. There's a Velkari there who calls themselves Crystal Depth of Ancient Waters. The security team immediately rushed toward the cargo bay, but Sarah knew they would find nothing. Crystal Depth had surely escaped the moment Marcus's unconscious broadcast revealed their meeting. Zekal looked at Crystal's song in morning. Is it true? The examiner asked. About the ascendancy reclaimed. The ancient Velkari researchers seemed to deflate slightly. There have been rumors for millennia, she admitted. Most scholars dismiss them as conspiracy theories, but there are gaps in the historical records regarding the Vormeth, inconsistencies that have never been adequately explained. Dr. Yamamoto looked up from his datapad. I found something, he announced, cross-referencing population records with energy consumption data from the Vormeth territories. The official story says they vanished suddenly, some kind of mass transcendence event, but energy usage dropped gradually over a 30-year period. That's not consistent with sudden disappearance. That's consistent with systematic depopulation. The implications settled over everyone like a toxic cloud. Sarah made her decision. We need an emergency meeting with the Concordance High Council, she said. Declared. All of this, the human psi readings, the ascendancy reclaimed, the questions about the Vormeth, it all needs to be addressed openly. No more secrets, no more conspiracies. Humanity deserves to know what we're walking into. And the Concordance deserves to hear our response. Crystal Song in Morning nodded slowly. I will arrange it, she said. But Captain Chen, you must understand, you have just stepped into politics that have been playing out for 12,000 years. Forces on all sides will try to use you. I know, Sarah replied, but here's something I've learned about humans. We really hate being used. Marcus, still radiating unconscious psi energy from his agitation, accidentally projected that sentiment. Every telepath on the station suddenly felt the full force of human stubbornness. It was like hitting a wall of pure defiance. And somewhere in the depths of the station, Crystal Depth of Ancient Waters smiled. The Concordance High Council Chamber was a structure built to inspire awe, carved from a single massive crystal that had formed naturally in zero gravity over millions of years. It refracted light into patterns that supposedly encouraged clear thinking and honest discourse. 27 council members occupied floating platforms arranged in concentric circles. Each represented one of the founding species of the Concordance. Sarah Chen stood in the center speaking platform, acutely aware that the entire gallery was filled with observers from hundreds of worlds. This session was being broadcast across the galaxy. Crystal Song in Morning had warned her that millions of beings would be watching. Honorable council members, Sarah began. I am Captain Sarah Chen, representing humanity. 4 weeks ago, we came to this station for a simple evaluation. We expected to learn where humans fit in your galactic society. Instead, have uncovered questions that challenge the foundation of the Concordance itself. The monitoring equipment around the chamber registered her baseline, 32.4. She was nervous, but controlled. Council member Velketh, an ancient Velkari who had served for 300 years, spoke first. Captain Chen, we have reviewed all data regarding human psi capabilities. The measurements are unprecedented and frankly alarming. We must address the safety concerns before any other considerations. Sarah nodded. I understand your concern, she replied. Humans represent something your civilization has never encountered. High psi potential without evolutionary safeguards. But I want to be clear about something. She paused, gathering her thoughts carefully. We are not the Vormeth. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Several council members rose from their platforms. Drath Representative. Yes, I dare, Sarah interrupted. Because the elephant in the room, or whatever the galactic equivalent is, needs to be addressed. The Ascendancy Reclaimed contacted us. They told us what really happened 12,000 years ago. They showed us evidence of systematic elimination. And thanks to my colleague Marcus Webb's unconscious broadcast, everyone on Kepler-7 now knows the story. Council member Velketh's crystalline form went dark. Those are serious accusations, he said coldly. Accusations that could destabilize galactic society. Then let's have the truth, Sarah demanded. Open the historical records. Let independent scholars examine what happened to the Vormith. Because humanity needs to know, are we joining a civilization that fears excellence, or one that cultivates it? Another council member, a Sessith named Juri, spoke up. Even if we acknowledged historical mistakes, which I am not conceding we made, it does not change the current situation. Your species possesses abilities that could reshape reality itself. You have no training, no discipline, no understanding of the dangers. We cannot simply allow humans to wander the galaxy, broadcasting their every thought and dream. Sarah took a deep breath. You're absolutely right, she agreed. The council members looked surprised. We need structure, Sarah continued. We need protocols. We need ways to coexist with other species without accidentally overwhelming them. But here's what we don't need. Suppression. She pulled up a holographic display. Over the past 3 weeks, Dr. Yamamoto has been working with your researchers to understand human psi potential. We've made some discoveries. The hologram showed brain scan comparisons. Humans don't need to eliminate our psi output, Sarah explained. We need to learn directional control. Think of it like sound. Most species evolve to whisper when necessary. That's your built-in limiters. Humans evolve to speak at full volume constantly. But we can learn to modulate our voices, to direct our words towards specific listeners. We just need to learn the technique. Dr. Yamamoto stepped forward. With permission to address the council, he asked. Velketh gestured assent. I have been working with meditation techniques from human traditions, Dr. Yamamoto explained. Practices that predate our knowledge of psi by thousands of years. Mindfulness, focused breathing, conscious attention direction. When I apply these techniques while monitored by concordance equipment, something interesting happens. Display showing his own psi readings over time. My baseline output drops from 35.2 to 18.4. Not through suppression, but through conscious awareness. I am not reducing my potential, I am choosing where to direct it. And when I need to focus that energy for a specific purpose, I can spike it to over 60. Several council members leaned forward with interest. Crystal Song and Morning spoke from the observer section. I have verified Dr. Yamamoto's results, she announced. He has achieved in 3 weeks what typically requires years of formal psi training. And he did it using purely human techniques that have no connection to psi theory. Ambassador Lu Chen stepped forward to join Sarah. We propose the following, the ambassador said. Humanity will develop our own psi management protocols based on our existing meditation and mindfulness traditions. We will work with concordance researchers to create shielding technology for shared spaces. We will designate specific zones on mixed species stations where humans agree to maintain reduced output. And we will commit to ongoing research into safe coexistence methods. But, Sarah added firmly, we will not accept training that suppresses our natural abilities. We will not submit to procedures designed to limit our potential. And we will not allow our species to be classified as inherently dangerous simply because we are different. Marcus Webb, who had been silent until now, spoke up. I've been thinking about this a lot, he said, and yes, I know that means I've been accidentally broadcasting my thoughts to everyone nearby. Sorry about that. Several telepaths in the gallery made gestures of acknowledgement. But here's the thing, Marcus continued. Humans have always been dangerous. We created nuclear weapons that could sterilize our planet. We developed artificial intelligence that could have destroyed us. We built genetic modification technology that could have created monsters. We figured out how to split atoms, rewrite DNA, and create thinking machines. And you know what we did with all that power? He paused dramatically. We made rules. We built safeguards. We taught ethics and responsibility. We didn't give up the power, we learned to wield it responsibly. That's what humans do. We don't fear our own capabilities. We respect them, we study them, we master them. As he spoke with growing passion, the Psi monitors registered a spike, 47.3. Objects in the chamber began to vibrate. Then Marcus stopped, took a deep breath, and the readings dropped, 23.1. See, he said with a slight smile, I just did that on purpose. 3 weeks ago, I didn't even know I was doing it. Give us time, and we'll get even better. Council member Velketh sat in silence for a long moment. You present a compelling case, the ancient Velkari finally said. But you have not addressed the ascendancy reclaimed. They clearly see humans as tools for their agenda. Sarah's expression hardened. We will not be tools for anyone, she declared. Not for the ascendancy reclaimed, not for any faction. If there are legitimate questions about Concordance history and policy, they should be addressed through proper channels, not through conspiracy and manipulation. We are happy to support historical review and policy reform. But we will do it as participants in the system, not as weapons against it. Another council member, a Corvin named Tekvar, spoke up. And if we cannot reach agreement, he asked, if the council decides that human psi potential is too dangerous to risk, gaze directly. Then humanity will decline Concordance membership, she replied. We will return to our own space. We will develop our abilities on our own. And we will meet you again in 100 years when we have mastered ourselves. But I don't think that's what anyone wants. The Psi monitoring equipment registered something unprecedented. Sarah's output was climbing steadily, 35, 40, 45. But it wasn't chaotic or uncontrolled. It was focused, directed, carrying a single clear message to every psi-sensitive being in the chamber. Determination, honesty, hope. The belief that different peoples could find a way to coexist despite their differences. The conviction that fear should not dictate policy. The very human stubbornness that refused to accept false choices between suppression and chaos. Reading 53.7, 28.4. That's our answer, she said quietly. We can learn. We can adapt. We can control when necessary and unleash when appropriate. Give us the chance to prove it. Council member Velketh looked around at the other council members. Something passed between them, a telepathic consensus that Sarah could only guess at. The council will recess to deliberate, Velketh announced. 3 hours later, they reconvened. The Concordance High Council has reached a decision, Velketh declared. Humanity will be granted provisional membership under special status. You will be classified as Pi Category Unique. We will establish joint research facilities to study human Pi potential and develop coexistence protocols. Human-occupied zones will be clearly marked and equipped with shielding technology. And we will open a formal historical review into the Vormeth disappearance. Council member paused. Furthermore, we acknowledge that the psi scale as currently constituted is inadequate. It was designed to measure controlled output, not raw potential. The discovery of human abilities forces us to reconsider our understanding of psi itself. Sarah felt tension drain from her body. Thank you, she said. Humanity accepts these terms. As the session concluded and the observers began filing out, Zekal approached Sarah. You have changed everything, the examiner said. When you first arrived, I thought I was conducting a routine evaluation. Instead, I witnessed the beginning of a new era. Sarah smiled tiredly. I just wanted a decent cup of coffee, and maybe not to start an interstellar incident. How did that work out for you? Zekal asked, with what might have been amusement. About as well as our Psi test results, Sarah replied. Gathered in their quarters. Marcus was designing a meditation app, specifically calibrated for Psi modulation. Dr. Yamamoto was writing a paper on integrating human mindfulness practices with galactic Psi theory. Ambassador Liu was drafting the formal protocols for human integration. Sarah stood by the viewport, looking out at the stars. Crystal Song in Morning found her there. You did well today, the Valkyrie said. We survived, Sarah replied. That's usually my definition of success. You did more than survive, Crystal Song in Morning corrected. You forced the Concordance to confront truths it has been avoiding for millennia. You proved that different can coexist with established. And you showed that power without control is not the same as power without responsibility. Sarah watched a transport ship drift past the station. What do you think really happened to the Vormeth? Quietly. Crystal Song in Morning was silent for a moment. I think we are about to find out, she finally replied. And I think humanity arrived at exactly the right moment. The galaxy needed someone to ask the difficult questions. Someone too new to be intimidated by ancient politics. Someone too powerful to be easily dismissed. In the observation lounge, Marcus suddenly laughed at something on his datapad. The sound of his amusement rippled through the psi field. Every sensitive being on the station felt a momentary flash of joy. Sarah smiled. The humans were going to make life very interesting indeed. And somewhere in the vast dark between stars, the psi scale registered readings it was never designed to measure. Numbers that climbed and climbed and climbed, because the human hadn't even focused. Not yet.